afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the December 9th, 2020 Norwood Airport Commission meeting. This meeting is using the go-to meeting format and is also recorded by NCM. Is there any other entity recording this meeting? Seeing none, thank you. Just checking, is Attorney Macarius there, please? Not yet, okay. So let's get going. First item on the agenda is AIP project updates with Du Bois and King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Jeff Adler with Du Bois and King. So we continue to work on the environmental assessment for the paved safety areas and the taxiway Charlie relocation, and now we've also added the fence, the new fence we're going to be putting up as part of that as well. So as I stated last month, we did our initial submission to the MIPA office last month, and we are on target to hear back from them at the end of December, at which point we're optimistic they will approve our preferred alternative. And at that point, we'll continue moving through the permitting process or the environmental assessment process through both MIPA and DEP. So that will be an ongoing thing through 2021 with the goal to complete all permitting and get our final approvals for those 3 projects at the end of 2021. So that's really it on that, unless anybody has any questions.
No questions from me, Jeff. Just a clarification on the current post-construction monitoring. Is that for 2 years?
Yeah, no, actually it's for 5 years.
It is 5, okay.
Yeah, yep.
Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
That'll be 5 years. So then I just wanted to give an update. We are proceeding along with the construction project for 2021, which is now the relocation of the small taxiway Delta stub, as well as the obstruction removal of the approaches to the 4 runway ends. So we are proceeding forward. We did have our scoping meeting, and I think Russ gave an update on we're completing the independent fee estimate, and we'll be putting together a contract. So we'll have a contract for the commission for next month's meeting. But we will be proceeding with that because we do need to, get that project out to bid by, second, third week in March, so we can open bids in, mid-April and apply for a grant application to FAA before May 1. And then, we would wait to get a grant for the construction, which would probably be, late summer. So that is our construction project for 2021, is the taxiway Delta relocation and the obstruction removal of basically trees out in the approaches. So any questions on that? And if not, that's basically all I had.
All right. Thank you, Jeff.
Yes.
Next up on the agenda, the November 18th, 2020 regular business meeting minutes. I just had a couple edits, just when we talk about Joe Barker, just the spelling of his name. Could change it to B-A-R-C-A. Any other revisions?
No, Mr. Chairman, and I make the motion to approve with the correction of Mr. Barker's spelling of his name be corrected and approve the minutes as presented thereafter.
Motion made
Second.
and seconded. All in favor, Mr. Sheehan,
Yes.
Mr. Corcoran,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan votes yes. Airport managers report. Russ.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add some more context to Jeff's earlier briefing to the commission about the project that we anticipate next year, which will be the Taxiway Delta construction project, along with the removal of obstructions on the in the runway approaches. Du Bois & King did submit an engineering fee proposal for $331,275. We also had an independent fee estimate, which was conducted as required by FAA. And the independent fee estimate came to $312,600. Even though Du Bois & King's engineering proposal was $18,675 higher than the independent fee estimate. Independent fee estimate, it is still within the 10% margin. So next month we anticipate from Du Bois & King that number again. The number from Du Bois & King for the engineering fee proposal, $331,275. As far as the airport manager's report, the only thing I would add on page 2, you'll see the financial matrix showing the revenues that we received the last 3 weeks. The Board of Selectmen asked that I include the FY 2021 revenues as well, which is the third column starting from the left. And also the fiscal year 2020 total financial numbers. So you've got those in addition to what you've seen in the past. That's all I have, unless there are any questions or comments on the manager's report.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, a couple of questions for Russ, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Sheehan.
Russ, just following up on last week's meeting on the signage for Tassio's and also for Southern Airways. Do you have an update on where those sign requests are and where they're heading?
The handicap parking for the Tassos Euro Cafe was installed by the Public Works Department about a month ago, I guess. ATP, my understanding was once they got the conditional approval of the commission, they would go to the building inspector, and I have not heard back on that signage.
Thanks, Russ, for the update.
And I'd like to add to that, the Southern Airways, those signs are being fabricated, so that's still in the works.
Thank you, and if there's no other discussion among the members, I make a motion to approve the airport manager's report.
Motion made
Second.
and seconded. Mr. Sheehan,
Yes.
Mr. Corcoran,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan votes yes. Next on the agenda, old business. This, at the last meeting in November, Flight Level advising us they're going to paint some parking spaces on their lease area across from Lot G on the other side of Taxiway 3. Norwood Engineering provided a plan. There was some opposition from one of the tenants, and Attorney Macarius asked for some time to look at the leases and see if there was any issues with us allowing, well, not voting on it, but at least not objecting to Flight Level painting those parking spaces. So, Attorney Macarius?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've reviewed the leases as well as correspondence from flight level with additional information and asked to see if BEH had anything additional to say. Based on our review, we don't think there's any action for the airport to take one way or another. I don't think your approval is necessary, and I don't see any basis for objecting to it from the airport's perspective.
Correct. So it's really just an information from flight level, and we'll move forward. Thank you. Next on the agenda, any questions on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I know that flight level submitted a plan. Can we make sure that gets placed on file? As well as the correspondences that we received on this matter?
Yes, Russ, he'll take care of that.
And Russ, I'll make sure that you have everything. It was only to council, but I think you do.
And Mr. Chairman, can we have these people mute? There's a lot of background noise I can't hear.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Mr. Cochran. Unless you're going to speak, let's keep us muted, because it does get a lot of feedback. I know it's pain going back and forth, muting and unmuting, but it helps out to keep it muted.
Caller 1 and caller 2.
Russ, you have any idea, caller 1 and 2?
No, but I can actually mute them out from where I'm.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have lease documents for the West Apron and the DC3 apron that BEH has recently signed. So before we go to that, Attorney Macarius, you want to say anything, or should we just proceed with voting on these with any revisions that we have in mind?
Well, let me actually set up the conversation, and I know Mr. Loeffler, counsel for BEH, is on the line, as well as BEH's president. And I made, you'll see why they may need to weigh in, or at least Mr. Loeffler may need to just explain a few details at the end. So we received on Friday signed leases from BEH. We reviewed them against the version that this commission had proposed in November 2019, and they are consistent. There were a handful of very small typographical things that we suggested be corrected. One significant, the sort of most obvious one is, given the passage of time, this is a 5-year lease that would have started end of 2019, now starts end of 2020. So just correcting the dates. The one remaining issue that we noticed that's of a little bit more substance is the appropriate plan to attach to the leases. There does not appear to be any dispute over what rights are provided, but which plan best captures them. I just wanted to be clear, what you have before you. So if you recall, when we had talked about this in November 2019, we had one set of plans. Subsequently, there was a title examination and a survey done by Norwood Engineering, which resulted in a March 2020 plan, early March 2020. We had those were the plans included. I understand from Mr. Loeffler, and I'll let him speak for himself if that's obviously your discretion, Mr. Chair, to explain this, that BEH's preference would be to include both plans in the lease. And I think that, and we just received, just prior to this call, the remaining markups to those typographical pieces. And again, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to hear from Mr. Loeffler just to explain the changes. There were one or two that have to do with the final square footage on each lot. I think there's agreement that what's being leased is those lots. The descriptors by square footage seem to be just a little bit off, depending on whether you're looking at the August 2019 plan or the surveyed plan, which should be more accurate. And obviously that affects the rent at the end of the day by slight amounts, not anything significant. So that's just the last thing to button down. Otherwise, I think you'd be ready to vote. So, Mr. Chair, my recommendation, if you don't mind, is just have Mr. Leffler explain that discrepancy in the issue, and I can then weigh in on with advice.
Sure, absolutely. Attorney Leffler?
Yeah, hey, thanks for letting me speak. Are you talking about just the plans themselves, or which plan to use? Is that the discrepancy?
Yes, I think that's the major one.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So Eric, maybe we could just take them one at a time just to make it easier. So,
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at let's start with the DC3 ramp first. I see that you and with Chris's, Mr. Donovan's initials have the change to the date up top, which certainly is not an issue.
Right.
A correction on the square footage, which you've changed to match the text to 15,000. And then if you keep scrolling, this one, the rent is not adjusted. So I think there's no change there. So this one, I guess the question is just which plan to use. And then we can talk about the West Apron likewise.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you for that. So, our preference is to use, we want this to be accurate. The preference is to use, unless I'm missing something, I think both plans have been approved. I think Chairman Ryan prepared, I could have this wrong, but I think he prepared the August 16th plan, which is one of them. And then we've got the Norwood Engineering plan as well. My understanding is that all the other existing leases at the airport use what would be similar to the plan that was prepared by Chairman Ryan. So our suggestion and request is that we use both. I don't think it's an insurmountable hurdle, Mina. I think we could work through it. If the commission has a preference for one or the other, our preference would be for both.
And I guess, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask Mr. Leffler just to clarify one or two things. As long as it's clear that I don't see a huge issue with that, as long as it's clear that we're not suggesting that one plan, the non-survey plan shows accurate things that would require a surveyor to survey. Right? That's
right.
Silly, but
right. We're certainly working under. Sorry, we're certainly working under the assumption that the surveyed plan is accurate. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think if we're on the same page there, at the end of the day, the details on the square footage and the lines are what they are in the surveyed plan. I just want to be clear about that.
Okay.
So that's fine on the DC3. I think.
Can I talk? Yeah. So it is, in my opinion, there's no way you can have two plans because they are not the same. Okay, the survey plan, after many requests by BEH on what was out there, how much area, the airport commission spent a considerable amount of money to have it professionally surveyed by Norwood Engineering to actually go out in the field and survey it, not compile plans, which we did with the plan back in August of 2019. The plan of 2019 for the DC3 ramp shows 15,295 square feet outside of the TOFA. The actual survey plan by Norwood Engineering has an area of the 14,930. So there's a discrepancy right there. And the lease is based on the area shown on the Norwood Engineering plan. So I'm not going to support having two plans. The Norwood Engineering plan is the most recent plan We spent a considerable amount of money and time preparing this, so everyone would have an accurate account of what was out there and what was being leased.
Okay, well, like I said, we want to get this thing accomplished, and we don't really want to belabor the point. If you want to use only the Norwood engineering plan, I think ultimately that'll be acceptable to us. And then we can derive the square footage, the lease rate using those numbers. I think they're marginal, is my understanding, but.
Correct.
Okay, so if that is the case, I mean, that certainly would be my preference as well, Eric. Otherwise, I was asking for clarity that one governs, but I think it would make more sense to not have both plans in there, as I said at the outset. So if we're going to do that, Mr. Chair, just taking one lease at a time, which might be, again, just more efficient. The DC3 ramp or apron lease would otherwise be set in the form provided to us this afternoon, just received, as long as we change back in paragraph 1, the square footage should be matched up with the surveyed plan, and the rental rate needs to be adjusted. The rental rate, excuse me, is still the same. That's something. Yeah. So, and that I think would carrying to the West Apron plan. That's the same. The West Apron lease. The same issues come up. Mr. Leffler, the other question I just had there is actually, I thought.
Mina, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So let's take DC3 by itself, right? Before
Sure.
we get the West Apron, so we can vote on that. Is that all right? And I'll mention the revisions that you identified, Russ and I have.
Sure. And let me just make one further suggestion, just given the COVID circumstances, that if there's no objection, I would recommend having the motion be a vote to authorize Mr. McGuire to sign both leases rather than try to get 3 electronic or hard signatures from each commissioner. You'd have your vote, but you'd still just have the lease actually signed by Mr. McGuire with your authority.
So do we need a vote from the commission to do that part?
Yeah, it could be part of the same vote, but as part of the motion on the link.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Sheehan.
Yeah, I have some comments, but I'm not prepared to vote, so I've got some comments on the DC3. I'll put them out here now, if you like.
Please.
So I'm in agreement that we're using the Norwood engineering plan dated November 9, 2019. And I'd like to see added to this agreement that within 10 days after the execution of the agreement, the leasee will record this plan at the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds Land Court so that there's no future discrepancies regarding what space is being rented. Second of all, there's a reference in Special Condition 7.1 that the leasee must provide a parking plan that's separate from this plan of the DC3 apron to the lessor, showing its intended use of transient non-based aircraft tie-down spaces as well as based aircraft tie-down spaces. Has that plan been presented along with the lease that they've signed?
I don't believe we've received that. Eric, Russ, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've received that.
Correct. I have not received anything along these lines.
So, that being said, I'm not authorizing, at least my perspective, Russ to sign my name. I'd like to see the revisions first, and I'd like to see the plan. If you go back to the first page of this, this was given to bought an executive helicopter in November of 2019 after several discussions with the lawyers working through this lease. And then over a year later, we received it all marked up and now signed. When in fact, a few months ago, we moved to do an RFP. But here we are today. So I'd like to see the revisions done. I'd like to see the agreement that the plan from Norwood Engineering. So let's see, is going to record it. And I'd like to see the parking plan for the DC3 apron. And at that point, if those revisions that we've discussed and those plans are approved and the plans are submitted for the parking, I'm prepared to approve this lease, but not until then.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. Would you be open to, if they were to turn this around quick enough, have a special meeting?
No, have it done next monthly meeting. I don't know how many special meetings we've had over the years at this time of the year when it's been sitting on for a year, actually for over 14 months. So I don't know why they couldn't just get the plan in. It's right in the lease, it's initial, and they don't present it. We can do it next month at our regular meeting. If they present that stuff, I'll vote in favor of it.
Okay, so let's work on what the revisions are and vote on those revisions. Is that, so the DC3 apron, we talked about section 1 ground space, changing the wording to 14,930 square feet to match the numerical number there. All right. Section 2, the term, corrected so it finishes the last day of November 2025. The effective date, Mina, will be when the NHC signs it. Would that be right?
That's correct. We changed the counter sign date, which I think is what Mr. Leffler proposed, assuming would have been tonight. That's right.
Okay. Section 4, use of premise, it's just a minor typo there. Halfway down, change the word lease to leased.
Mhm.
And then use only the Norwood engineering plan.
And that be recorded by the lessee within 7 days after this agreement is executed by all parties.
So a lease is typically recorded at the registry of deeds?
Just looking for the plan to be recorded. Leases can and cannot, that can go either way, but Mina can talk on that.
Mr. Sheehan is right. Leases are not often recorded. Sometimes a notice of lease is recorded. We haven't discussed this provision with BEH before about recording the plan. Mr. Leffler, I don't know if you're prepared to answer this, but if you could do that, I think that would take care of one issue of just making sure we're talking about the same plan.
I would have some concerns about that. I don't know that we necessarily have an objection to it being recorded. It's not our plan. It was a plan prepared on behalf of the town. I think it would make more sense if you guys want to have it recorded that somebody do it on behalf of the town. We wouldn't object to that.
It was done by the town on the behalf of BEH. And as Mark mentioned, a considerable amount of money and time have been spent. And here we are 13 months later, out of the blue, you sign a lease and send it over. I would think that if you want to go forward in good faith, you would record it. But if it's the case that we record it, I would also ask media that we do file a notice of a lease in place with the plan. If that's the issue, I'm not going to make a big deal about it. We can record it. That's fine. But it has to be recorded so that there's no discrepancy on who has what that we've been going through for years and years and years with both Flight Level and BEH. So just so you know, the plan will be recorded, and I guess me and you guys can decide who records it.
Okay, so that's not part of the condition for the lease, but that's a task we'll take care of. So I identified 5 revisions or clarifications on the lease. Is there a vote on those?
And then one more, Mr. Chairman, I'll add to it in section 7, paragraph 1. It's required that the leasee provide, and I think I read it, that the leasee provide a parking plan for the tie downs. So that would have to be part of the package, the lease that comes over to us next month.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Yes, please.
and maybe he doesn't want to say anything, but if I could ask that maybe Chris, Mr. Donovan could be heard on that briefly.
Sure. Chris Donovan?
Mr. Chairman, Chris Donovan, Boston Executive Helicopters. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address the commission. There's already portrayed tie downs on both the west ramp and the DC3 ramp. So if it's acceptable to you and the commission, I can send that over to you tomorrow, showing the depicted tie downs that are already located, and they're already drilled into the pavement. They're part of the pavement plan on both of those ramps, and we can use those tie down plans for both ramps.
So if I could, just looking at that special condition, Mr. Donovan, it says the lessee shall provide a parking plan showing the intended use of transient non-based aircraft tie-down spaces, as well as based aircraft tie-down. So is that delineating what's transient and what's?
Yeah, what I would do, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you and the commission, is the existing tie downs are already in the ramps, so I'll denote which tie downs are going to be used for transient and which ones are going to be used for based. I believe it also says in the lease that some of them may be used for both, but I'll denote on the plan, which already shows the existing tie downs. Those are part of the ramps. Which ones are transient and which ones are not.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we had 6 different items. The ground space wording, term of the lease, the effective date, just a minor spelling on use of premise, use and out engineering plan, and BEH will provide that parking plan of the DC3 apron, delineating transient and based aircraft tie-down spaces. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to direct the council for the Norwood Airport Commission to make those necessary changes available to BEH, and if they're all in agreement, bring us back a clean copy for approval for the next meeting. And that is condition 2 on seeing that plan that Mr. Donovan spoke to.
Yes. Motion made.
And second.
Motion made and seconded. Mr. Sheehan,
Yes.
Mr. Corcoran,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan votes yes. On to the west apron. I think it's pretty straightforward, Attorney Macarius. Should I just go ahead with the different minor revisions, or do you want to add anything else?
Mr. Ryan, if you could do that, and then I just want to, I'll confirm that there's nothing else that I'm seeing. So go ahead. Great. So the West Apron lease was reviewed, and some of the things that, some minor changes, the term,
correct it so it's the last day of November 2025. Correct the effective date to when the NAC signs it. Section 3 rent, it's a minor change, but change to 73,238 square feet in a monthly payment of $3,051.58. Section 4, use of premise, halfway down, that minor spelling change lease to leased. Once again, use only the Norwood engineering plan. And speaking on behalf of Vice Chairman Sheehan, as he brought up in the DC3 apron, provide the parking plan showing intended use of transient and based aircraft tie-down spaces. And I believe that's it that I had.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that the Norwood Airport Commission direct council to make those revisions and present them to BEH for approval, and then come back to the Norwood Airport Commission at next month's meeting for approval.
Motion made
And motion second.
and seconded. Mr. Sheehan,
Yes.
Mr. Cochran,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan votes yes. Terrific. This is great. Thank you.
And Mr. Ryan, just while
Yes.
we're here, what I would suggest, Eric and Chris, if it's okay with you, I will make those changes on a clean copy so that you don't have to initial everything, and then we can redistribute that. And that should happen in the next day or two.
Thank you. We have a lot of correspondence. Any action there by any of the commissioners?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sheehan,
Regarding the dismissal in the federal court action, I think it's important to note that BEH filed another lawsuit against the commission seeking imposed sanctions and award attorney fees, and plaintiff's motion to enforce the settlement agreement. Judge Stearns came back and denied all of those claims. What's most important for me is the perspective of when BEH filed their original suit many years ago, made all their allegations. Judge Stearns dismissed 11 of the 12, I believe that was the number, and left one there, retaliation. As we went through that process, BEH decided to settle with the town of Norwood, and those of us that were on the committee at the time never had the opportunity to stand against that retaliation claim, because it was an alleged claim and there wasn't any truth to it. Well, in the same complaint, BEH filed their action number 6, retaliation against BEH. I want to quote Judge Stearns' decision. The court will not consider the allegation. I think for those of us that were here at the time and listened to a lot of those retaliation, false claims, I think it's vindication for all of us that in this matter we've always done the right thing, and it's now been confirmed by 2 federal authorities, the FHA and the federal court. So I'm happy to report that. I also want to report many people in the public misunderstood that this cost the town of Norwood millions of dollars. It did not. Yes, one insurance carrier refused to defend the town, meaning the airport commission, but the town has several insurance carriers under umbrella policies. And under the policy issued by the MIAA, Mass Municipal Association, they covered it. They covered all of the legal fees for the town, and they covered the settlement. So, Norwood Airport Commission always acted in the best interest of the Norwood Airport, the citizens of Norwood and the town, and those people that use the airport. So it's important that be cleaned up, because there's still rumors being spread out there that this cost, our actions protected this town. And I'm happy to report that, and I'm happy to report they've finally been vindicated that we did not retaliate against anyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if there's no further discussion, I'll move that all correspondence be placed on file.
Motion made.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. To Mr. Sheehan's point, well said. We have always acted in good faith for the town and the airport, so I'm glad this is behind us. And I'm really actually excited that we're having these leases signed so we can see some more business down the airport. And more business there is good for the airport and good for the town of Norwood. So motion has been made and seconded.
Mr. Chairman, can I amend my motion?
Yes.
There was a correspondence from a third party seeking to get information from the airport commission regarding an FBO, but their letter was incorrect, because their letter stated, and forgive me, I had it here, I can't find it. Russ can probably tell us who it was. Their letter said that they were going to investigate if Norwood Airport can support 2 FBOs. I think before we respond to any of that information they requested, that we ask Russ to send a letter or communication or email, however he deems it, to let them know that there already are 2 FBOs, and we're going to have those leases signed. I'm in favor of signing those leases. I just wanted to clear up a few things. But I think we should first send a letter back to that company, Russ and Mr. Chairman, and say, look, there are 2 FBOs here. Do you still require information? Before Russ goes through all this, because it seemed to be a lot of information they wanted from Russ. So that would just be my suggestion in my amendment to my motion there, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add to that, just this pertains to Commissioner Sheehan's request. I actually reached out to the gentleman from SAR Trilogy Management Company that had sent me the email requesting, really soliciting our interest in having a second FBO. I did actually return that phone call, left a message because the gentleman who had sent the email wasn't there at the time, to let him know that we do have 2 FBOs already here at the Norwood Airport. And if you were still interested in me providing some of that information, I'd be happy to, but we already have 2 FBOs here at the airport. Have not heard back from the gentleman.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Russ, and thank you.
Just to that point, Mr. Chairman, I think then we have to have a discussion. Do we entertain a 3rd FBO? I mean, if they decide that, okay, we want to try to do this, are we going to entertain that? So that's a discussion for down the road, but thank you, Russ, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. So Mr. Sheehan has a motion on the floor with a slight revision. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Mr. Sheehan,
Yes.
Mr. Cochran,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan votes yes. All right. So we are to go into executive session. And I'll read, for purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation if an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Norwood Airport Commission. Boston Executive Helicopter versus Town of Norwood, and Flight Level Norwood LLC versus Town of Norwood. We'll go into executive session for that, plus meeting minutes of the November 18th executive session. And when we exit executive session, we will be also closing the hearing for the public meeting and will not return to public meeting. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made. Ian,
Second.
Mr. Sheehan,
Yes.
Mr. Corcoran,
Yes.
and Mr. Ryan votes yes. Thank you, everyone, and happy holidays.